At just 10 years old, young Master Isaac receives a prestigious recommendation to enter the Royal Academy. The entire mansion erupts in celebration, bringing out extravagant feasts while servants openly praise our boy as an undeniable prodigy destined for greatness. The 10-year-old menace smiles brightly as faithful servant Hans steps forward carrying a massive ribboned gift box, eagerly congratulating his young master for bringing such monumental honor to the noble household. Just as Isaac accepts the present, his younger brother Jonas walks in carrying a finely crafted lute. Hans immediately heaps praise on the kid, declaring his musical talent so exceptional that even royal court bards would be humbled. Little bro strums a melodious note with a cheerful grin, but the golden memory violently fractures into a blood-soaked nightmare of tragic screams, slamming Isaac awake in absolute terror. Drenched in cold sweat, our silver-haired protagonist gasps for air inside a grim fortress stone chamber. The agonizing ghost of his past weighs heavily on his mind, reminding him that he can never return to those golden days. Heavy footsteps echo outside before the wooden door slides open. A friendly companion steps into the dark room carrying a warm lantern and a fresh meal, immediately growing deeply concerned after seeing Isaac's deathly pale face. Clutching his throbbing temple, the battered young master yields to intense physical fatigue, while his attendant gently sets down a heartwarming tray filled with steaming stew, baked potatoes, and fresh bread. Staring at the dinner with hollow, weary eyes, Isaac vividly recalls the tragic downfall of his youth when he unexpectedly collapsed in bed, showing zero signs of recovery while his family watched on. Doctors shook their heads in defeat while his father collapsed in despair. Isaac's condition defied every cure, turning a once promising future into an inescapable nightmare that shattered his family. Then came the violent mana explosion. Uncontrollable magic surged from his body without warning, unleashing a terrifying shockwave that tore through the chamber and devastated everyone nearby. Blood stained the floors as loyal servants lay injured around him. His little brother's beloved instrument was destroyed, and his father looked upon his once blessed son with horror. Shunned and isolated in a lonely stone chamber, the silver-haired outcast counted the endless days while eating meager rations, doomed to rot away as a forgotten broken prodigy. Suddenly, a harsh cough breaks the quiet. The loyal attendant collapses against the heavy wooden door, gasping for air as blood spills uncontrollably from his lips. Isaac instantly realizes the grim truth: it's mana poisoning. Staying near his unstable body for years has corrupted his companion's health, turning endless loyalty into a slow death sentence. Rushing over, our boy hands him a clean cloth and holds him steady. Yet the servant just wipes the blood away and flashes a reassuring smile, insisting he's perfectly fine. As his attendant turns to leave with a gentle farewell, Isaac's eyes widen with dark realization. He cannot let another innocent life be sacrificed to his uncontrollable curse. Dark memories flood his mind, of sitting alone at a grand banquet surrounded by slaughtered servants, trapped inside a nightmare room where his uncontrolled mana took everything from him. Staring across the bloody feast toward the distant doorway, Isaac makes a decisive resolve. He will shatter his fate before his deadly power claims the last person who cares for him. Isaac snaps awake from the blood-soaked terror of his nightmare, gasping frantically for air in the cold darkness, while agonizing memories of his past continue to torment his shattered mind. Grim tragedy strikes soon after. His faithful attendant Lucas succumbs to mana poisoning and dies, leaving our disgraced prodigy completely isolated in total solitary confinement while meager bread is shoved through a slot. Endless seasons bleed together inside the gloomy stone chamber. Cherished memories of his former life fade into distant echoes while stale, moldy rations become his only connection to the outside world. Decades slip away within this living grave. The once promising child grows into a weathered old man, obsessively carving line after line into the dungeon wall just to keep count of his forgotten lifespan. Yet the silver-haired mage refuses to perish in obscurity. Day after day, he pores over complex spell blueprints and meditates in total silence, determined to master the infinite secrets of magic. Scraping mold off stale crusts just to stay alive, he tirelessly crafts mana crystals and covers every inch of stone wall with decades of grueling research, pushing his mind to the ultimate limit. Suddenly, heavy footsteps reverberate through the outer hallway. The firm boot heels come to a sudden halt directly outside the locked wooden door, breaking a silence that had lasted for decades. A voice softly calls through the heavy barrier. It's his younger brother Jonas, gently asking if he's awake. Our elderly hero freezes in utter shock, clenching his fist as decades of hidden emotions come rushing back. Separated by a heavy wooden barrier, Jonas breaks decades of agonizing silence, gently asking how his exiled older brother has been surviving inside this dark dungeon after all these endless, miserable years of isolation. As his brother's voice continues to resonate from the hallway, golden memories of their joyful childhood briefly flood Isaac's mind, painting a deeply tragic contrast against the cold stone cell he has inhabited for decades. Standing outside the locked cell, Jonas grimly reveals the shocking atrocities and betrayals committed against their once great noble household. Hearing the brutal truth, our silver-haired hero clenches his scarred hands in absolute fury. A sudden aura of violent red energy flares around Isaac as raw mana surges wildly through his aging veins. The devastating revelation completely shatters his composure, awakening an unstoppable rage deep inside the veteran mage. Suddenly, agonizing, choking coughs reverberate through the outer hallway, abruptly cutting off their dialogue. Realizing his younger brother is in life-threatening danger, our elderly hero leaps to his feet in panic, frantically shouting through the iron-bound door. A fresh pool of thick crimson blood slowly seeps underneath the wooden threshold. Driven by overwhelming dread, Isaac flings open the heavy cell door, discovering a blood-stained boot print and a discarded weapon lying on the stone floor. Jonas staggers across the doorway and collapses directly into Isaac's arms, his body heavily torn by fatal sword strikes. Paralyzed by profound shock and grief, our legendary mage cradles his dying brother as life fades from his eyes. Before the heartbroken hero can even comprehend this horrific nightmare, heavy, ominous footsteps reverberate down the dark corridor, signaling that the ruthless executioner is stepping forward to finish off the last surviving bloodline. Carrying his brother's lifeless body up the dungeon steps, our heartbreak-stricken hero weeps violently. He clutches the skeletal frame, devastated by how severely Jonas suffered and starved while locked away. Emerging from decades of dark imprisonment, daylight finally touches the weathered mage's face. But the world outside offers no warmth, only the horrific reality of their fallen home. Stepping into the courtyard, Isaac finds the entire estate completely reduced to slaughter and ash. Swords stick out of bloodied rubble, leaving the solitary old man to carry his fallen brother through the frozen wasteland alone. Holding Jonas until the winter chill passes, our grief-stricken protagonist waits for spring to lay his beloved family to rest. Standing beside twin headstones, he buries the last remnants of his past. With nothing left to live for, the Master Mage grasps a brilliant blue crystal, channeling decades of accumulated mana into one final desperate spell. Flames surge from his palm as ancient magic awakens. Raw wind whips across the clearing while fire engulfs his hand. As power surges beyond human limits, the mana crystal shatters under the overwhelming strain of his forbidden ultimate technique. The skies open up into torrential rain as Isaac collapses over the fresh earth, crushed under the suffocating weight of total regret and ultimate failure. Visions of the destroyed castle and slaughtered kin flash through his mind. If only he hadn't surrendered to his curse, perhaps he could have saved everyone from this catastrophic doom. Lying on the damp grass, the 70-year-old outcast breathes his final breath. Brilliant golden light envelopes his aging body as his exhausted heart comes to a complete stop. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoes through the ethereal void. Isaac's eyes snap wide open in absolute shock, staring out with youth returned to his face as time itself turns back. Isaac snaps his eyes open to a sunny, luxurious bedroom instead of death. Across the lavish chamber walks his faithful attendant Lucas, alive, breathing, and completely free of mana poisoning. Sitting up in disbelief, our silver-haired protagonist stares down at his smooth, unblemished hands. He rushes over to the window, unable to comprehend this miraculous second chance at life. Looking down into the courtyard, he spots old bro Jonas happily swinging from a tree branch with a wooden toy, laughing without a single care while a frantic maid scolds him from below. Overwhelmed with emotion, Isaac presses his hand against the glass with a tearful smile. The nightmare of watching his family die in blood and flame has been completely erased. Stepping back into the light, raw magic flares around his young body. He has regressed 60 years into the past, retaining every ounce of his ultimate 10th-class magic mastery. With his blue eyes blazing with absolute resolve, the reborn prodigy prepares to rewrite history. He will destroy his enemies, protect his family, and break free from the shackles of fate once and for all. Inside the grand mansion, anxious maids scrub shattered furniture and spilled ink, whispering nervously about the young master's latest destructive episode. But as the quiet gossip continues, an injured attendant walking on crutches suddenly freezes in the doorway. Our silver-haired protagonist emerges silently from the dark shadows right behind him, locking him in a tense, unyielding stare. Before the crippled servant can move, our boy firmly grips his clothes, holding him in place with surprising physical strength. Our young regressed archmage stares up with cold blue eyes, demanding immediate tactical updates. The surprised attendant turns around with a sharp look, instantly realizing that something fundamental has shifted inside this formerly erratic child. Instead of pulling back, the loyal attendant drops to one knee and grasps the boy's shoulders with steady reassurance. He speaks with heartfelt devotion, promising to handle every threat facing the noble house. A warm, genuine smile breaks across his face as he attempts to soothe his young master, completely unaware of the dark future approaching. However, that comforting gesture only triggers dark memories of tragic bloodstains and destruction in our protagonist's mind. Having regressed 60 years into the past with 70 years of Archmage experience, he knows the gruesome fate that awaits this estate if he fails to alter history. He lowers his head, quietly taking on the grim burden alone. See, in his original timeline, peaceful moments like his innocent little brother, climbing trees to play with toys, were brutally stolen by betrayal. Gazing out through the tall window pane, the silver-haired general presses his palm against the glass. He watches the quiet courtyard below, swearing that no enemy will ever destroy his loved ones again. The loyal attendant continues speaking calmly while standing framed by the bright morning light. But when our boy nearly shouts out a frantic warning about the coming disaster, the urgent words catch in his throat. He stops himself just in time, swallowing his emotional outburst because an unproven prediction of doom would only sound like insanity right now. Tightening his white-knuckled grip on his wooden crutch, the servant turns back toward the grand doorway with resolute discipline. He gives one last gentle glance before exiting into the hallway, leaving our young mastermind standing alone in the vast room. The heavy wooden door clicks shut, signaling that the countdown to conflict has officially begun. Without a moment's hesitation, our boy snaps his arm up and slaps his own cheek hard enough to echo through the room. The sharp physical sting instantly clears away lingering hesitation and emotional fog. A bright red mark spreads across his skin while his icy blue eyes narrow with absolute, unshakable tactical focus. See, he already lived through the soul-crushing despair of weeping over fresh grave mounds in the pouring rain. Turning back to the window, he looks down at his vibrant young brother playing happily beneath the green trees. That innocent, smiling face is all the motivation our regressed Archmage needs to annihilate anyone who dares threaten his home. Standing quietly by the grand sunlit window, the silver-haired boy collects his thoughts while staring down at his young, unblemished hands. In his lost original timeline, he was known far and wide as Ziek von Goethe, a legendary Grand Master who stood at the absolute pinnacle of magic power after surviving decades of devastating war. See, in that dark past, he spent 70 long, grueling years mastering every secret spell discipline as an unmatched 10th-class Archmage. But despite accumulating divine levels of magic knowledge, his frail, worn-out body eventually collapsed from sheer physical exhaustion, sending his ancient soul regressing 60 years back into his 9-year-old body. Back at his grand study desk, our silver-haired mastermind immediately gets down to serious business without wasting a single second. Using swift, disciplined hand movements, he carves intricate rune formulas onto fresh parchment while aligning a glowing blue runestone, preparing the exact magical components needed to test his current power level. Pressing the cool, humming blue crystal directly against his cheek, Ziek takes a brief, quiet moment to enjoy being young and energetic once again. But behind that calm, relaxed face, he fully understands that his current child body possesses fragile mana pathways that will dangerously rupture if he rushes his spellcasting. See, under standard arcane principles, a sorcerer's mana vessel acts like a tranquil lake holding raw power inside the soul. But Ziek's internal vessel is fundamentally broken and unstable. The moment mana flows in, the container violently explodes under pressure, only to instantly reconstruct itself in an endless, agonizing cycle of backfire. Realizing that forcing raw mana through a broken vessel will blow up his physical body, the little general devises a genius tactical workaround. He places the blue runestone onto his paper diagram and carefully inks a custom secondary circuit, drawing a brand new pathway to bypass the defective mana core entirely. With his theoretical blueprint completed, our boy decides to execute an immediate live spell test right at his study desk. He extends his right hand and sparks a small, flickering flame above his open palm, swallowing nervously while tracking every single drop of magic circulating through his juvenile bloodstream. Without warning, that tiny spark erupts into a roaring inferno. The elemental fire flares violently out of control right above his fingers, scorching the room's air and forcing our young mage to cry out in shock as he stumbles backward, away from the sudden, dangerous heat blast. Instantly, a devastating mana reflux strikes his entire physical frame. Glowing cyan magic veins flash intensely across his chest as the uncontrolled feedback loop slams straight into his heart, threatening to tear his internal organ structure completely apart from the sheer violent force of the magic recoil. Relying on 70 years of battle-tested instinct, Zeke thrusts the blue runestone high into the air, forcibly rerouting the volatile magic surge straight into the crystal catalyst. The blinding aura stabilizes into a calm shine, leaving our regressed Archmage gasping for breath after successfully taming the volatile energy surge. With the dangerous magic reflux successfully tamed, Zeke tightly clenches his fist around the blue runestone catalyst. Standing inside his quiet study, the little general collects his composure while reflecting on the immense power now stabilized in his hands. He narrows his focus, holding the humming crystal firmly in his palm. After testing his custom secondary circuit, our boy confirms that his genius bypass blueprint completely prevents his defective mana vessel from exploding under intense spell pressure. Shortly after nightfall, his loyal attendant enters the dimly lit study carrying a hot tray of stew and baked bread. Placing the food down at the desk, he smiles warmly, eager to see his young master eat a proper meal. The attendant playfully holds up a slice of bread on a fork directly in front of Zeke's face. Persisting with affectionate nagging, he insists he will not leave the room until the young master takes at least one bite. Reluctantly giving in to the gentle pressure, our 9-year-old menace bites into the warm bread. A soft blush touches his cheeks as the familiar flavor washes over his palate, bringing back overwhelming nostalgia after 70 long years of eating harsh war rations in his previous life. However, as he lifts a spoon of stew toward his mouth, Zeke suddenly freezes mid-motion. He abruptly sets the utensil back down onto the desk, his playful demeanor completely vanishing in an instant. Locking his icy blue eyes onto the crippled attendant standing nearby in the candlelight, Zeke grows unnaturally quiet. The attendant's gentle smile fades into anxious concern as he feels the heavy, oppressive tension taking over the room. Staring silently past his dinner plate, our young mastermind rests his chin on his hand in deep thought. Digging through decades of ancient memories, he carefully calculates the precise timeline of upcoming events surrounding the noble house. Grim realization suddenly strikes his mind as dark memories of a tragic past event resurface. He vividly recalls an incoming disaster where a loyal servant was brutally murdered in a sudden attack, leaving young Zeke weeping helpless over her bloodied body in the ruined mansion. Determined to alter history, our regressed Archmage sets down his spoon and locks his icy gaze onto his attendant. Taken aback by the heavy shift in atmosphere, the startled servant blinks in complete confusion as cold tactical focus replaces the peaceful quiet. Zeke abruptly slams his hand onto the wooden desk, rising to his feet with fierce urgency. He forcefully demands to know which monsters were recently subjugated in the area, preparing to hunt down the coming threat before history repeats itself. Deep within the silent winter woods, a peaceful night is abruptly shattered as a roaring fireball tearing through the dark forest violently explodes. A terrified deer leaps across the snowy clearing in a frantic, desperate scramble to escape the sudden wall of blinding flames. As the heavy smoke clears, our boy strides forward completely unfazed by the intense heat. Testing his newly awakened mana, the former Grand Mage summons a flickering flame right into his palm, slowly adjusting to his young body while hauling his heavy travel pack and sturdy shovel. Pressing deeper into the frozen territory, he marches past a weathered wooden signpost marking the trail to Black Goose Village. Every single step brings our young strategist closer to the critical location where his first major operation in this realm will unfold. Inside a quiet room at the estate, he interrogates a limping local about recent suspicious movements. The nervous man scratches his cheek as he remembers seeing suspicious merchants secretly transporting frozen monster parts on heavy supply carts right through the local district. Late into the night, our little general sits on his bed intently studying an ancient monster manual. Turning directly to the entry for the fearsome ice spider, his eyes narrow with cold focus as he confirms the exact beast responsible for producing those frozen harvest components. Dark memories from his previous timeline immediately flood his mind. He vividly remembers the horrifying curse that swept through the population back then, suffocating innocent victims as their eyes turned pitch black while they clawed at their own throats in absolute agony. Determined to stop the deadly outbreak before it starts, he heads back into the deep forest at the break of dawn to forage for rare medicinal plants. Working with meticulous speed, he harvests clusters of vital herbs and packs them tightly inside his leather container. Catching his breath after hours of intense manual labor, he wipes the sweat from his forehead. With his container stuffed to the brim with fresh white herbs, he shoulders his heavy gear and trudges out of the forest under the bright morning sun with absolute resolve. Thoughts of the influential figures from his past life race through his mind, from veteran commanders standing guard on icy castle ramparts to loved ones walking through golden fields. If he executes his strategic plan properly, he will rewrite their tragic destinies once and for all. As night falls over Black Goose Village, peaceful lights illuminate the quiet houses along the river. High inside a stone tower, a maid keeps a solemn watch beside a bedridden patient, completely oblivious that a savior is already preparing to change everything. The startled maid gasps in absolute shock as a hooded figure abruptly darkens the doorway late at night. Pulling down his heavy fur-trimmed cloak to reveal his unmistakable silver hair, our boy steps inside while keeping his lower face covered with a tight protective cloth mask. Relieved yet thoroughly bewildered, the maid pulls him into a tight embrace and urgently asks what on earth happened to his mud-stained travel clothes. But our young strategist stays laser-focused on the mission, brushing off her worries without offering a single word of excuse. Without wasting a single precious second of time, Lil Bro pulls a heavy leather pouch out from his pack and shoves it directly into her hands. Stuffed to the brim with fresh white medicinal herbs, he firmly instructs her to begin processing the remedy immediately. He marches straight into the dimly lit bedchamber where the sick boy lies suffering in agony. Intense fever racks the young patient's shivering body while ominous blue poison spots begin spreading across his pale skin, signaling the lethal onset of the ice spider plague. Stepping directly beside the quiet bed, our little general calmly inspects the rapid progression of the deadly curse. The agonizing boy barely manages to flutter his swollen eyes open, staring up at his mysterious young savior through a heavy haze of feverish sweat. While the terrified maid whimpers nervously behind her mask, our former Grand Mage places a gentle, reassuring hand right on the boy's burning forehead. His cool touch brings instant comfort, silently assuring them both that this fatal nightmare will soon come to an end. At the break of dawn, our boy treks high into the rugged mountain wilderness alongside a limping local guide. Standing right outside the gaping entrance of an ominous cavern, the nervous local holds up his glowing lantern and warns that the interior is pitch dark. Flipping a shiny gold coin directly into the guide's trembling palm, our little general dismisses his anxious escort without a second thought. With cold determination glowing in his sharp blue eyes, the 9-year-old menace prepares to enter the monster's lair completely unassisted. Rousing his reawakened mana circuit, the young prodigy summons brilliant spheres of warm magic light right inside his open palms. The intense radiant flare instantly shatters the surrounding gloom, casting away the heavy darkness as mana surges effortlessly through his young veins. Relying on decades of master strategy from his previous timeline, our boy steps decisively into the eerie cave depth. With glowing mana light hovering alongside him, he marches into the abyss to hunt down the ice spider monster and eradicate the outbreak at its source once and for all. Deep inside the dark cavern tunnel, our boy zeroes in on a cluster of glowing blue berries. Pulling out his reference book, the former Grand Mage carefully compares the plant's distinctive leaves with the manual's entries, confirming he has found the exact toxic herb responsible for synthesizing the deadly outbreak. With zero hesitation, Lil Bro grabs the stem and tears the wild plant right out of the dirt. But the raw poison is so ridiculously potent that painful blisters break out across his bare skin on impact, proving its lethal quality as he packs the harvest safely into his pouch. Ignoring the burning sting on his hand, the little general shoulders his heavy travel pack and presses further down the gloomy cavern passage. Guided by floating spheres of radiant mana light, every single step brings him deeper into the dark, uncharted depths of the dangerous monster's subterranean domain. Reaching a steep vertical drop, his sharp eyes lock onto a crude wooden rope ladder suspended from the cliffside. Seeing clear evidence of human construction inside a dangerous monster cavern raises immediate red flags, forcing our young strategist to pause as heavy suspicion takes root. Grabbing the coarse rope ladder with a firm grip, our boy climbs down the sheer drop into the dark abyss below. Stepping onto the cold stone floor, the intense physical toll of his unconditioned 9-year-old body forces him to pause for a moment to wipe away his sweat. As his glowing magic illuminates the vast chamber ahead, a gruesome sight unfolds before his eyes. The entire cavern floor is littered with piles of shattered animal skeletons and massive creature skulls, confirming he has walked straight into the primary feeding ground of a monster. Recognizing the dangerous airborne toxins in the chamber, our little general quickly pulls up his protective cloth face mask and secures it tightly. Sweat trickles down his face, but his gaze remains cold and unwavering as he mentally prepares his tactical battle strategy for the impending clash. Suddenly, a massive razor-sharp leg stabs down from the high ceiling shadows above. Rapid chitinous skittering echoes across the rocky cavern floor as the fearsome ice spider launches a lethal ambush, rushing toward him at terrifying speed to claim its next human meal. Refusing to flinch under the monster's sudden leap, our 9-year-old menace swallows hard and immediately rouses his reawakened mana circuit. Raising his right palm high into the air, he instantly summons a blazing sphere of high-tier fire magic to incinerate the approaching beast once and for all. Unleashing his reawakened mana circuit, our boy launches a roaring fireball straight into the pitch-black cavern. The intense flame arcs dramatically across the underground chamber, keeping the predatory ice spider at bay and buying our young strategist the crucial seconds needed to prepare his main attack. Securing his protective cloth mask tight over his mouth, the former Grand Mage drops to his knees, beside the leather pouch crammed with harvested toxic berries. Completely ignoring the raw blisters burning on his hand, our little general calmly prepares to turn the monster's poisonous habitat into a fatal death trap. With sharp tactical precision, Lilba points his finger directly at the toxic harvest and ignites it with a concentrated spark of magic. The burning poisonous berries immediately combust, releasing a heavy billowing cloud of lethal green gas that rapidly fills the deep cavern air. The dense toxic smoke sweeps relentlessly across the massive feeding ground, blanketing every inch of the subterranean chamber. Inhaling the highly concentrated airborne toxin, the ambushing ice spiders screech in absolute agony as the paralyzing poison instantly forces their chitinous bodies to collapse. One by one, the terrifying monsters crash like trash onto the cold cavern floor, completely neutralized by the lethal fumes. Shielded behind his protective mask, our 9-year-old menace gazes across the fallen horde with icy composure, securing a masterclass tactical victory and eradicating the fatal plague at its source. Deep inside his massive study, our reborn mage sits surrounded by towering stacks of books, carefully drafting his next strategic move. But just as his quill glides smoothly across the parchment, a sudden chaotic commotion erupting right outside the window forces his hand to instantly freeze in place. Down in the courtyard below, a terrified man shouts hysterically at the guards, creating a frantic scene over some unknown disaster. Hearing the loud, unseemly outburst, the little general takes one cold look through the glass before turning away with complete and utter indifference. Taking his seat back at the wooden desk, our boy stays laser-focused on what truly matters to his long-term survival. To rebuild his flawed mana core and overcome his body's severe physical constraints, he requires secret records and priceless materials located in Demetridium, setting his immediate path forward. Even as a suffocating, ominous pressure fills the vast room, the silver-haired mastermind maintains an unshakable grin. Carrying the sharp mind of a 70-year-old archmage, he foresees every impending crisis and knows exactly how to manipulate the coming storm to his absolute benefit. Refusing to waste a single second on petty local squabbles, the young genius dives straight into relentless, uninterrupted research. His pen flies across the pages as he transcribes complex high-order spell formulas, pushing his young brain to digest decades of advanced magical knowledge without flinching. Formula after formula, diagram after diagram, the ink covers the paper with blistering speed like a relentless war machine. His glowing blue eyes lock onto the parchment with intense focus, pouring 60 years of high-tier arcana to construct the ultimate foundation for his power. See, back during his dangerous underground expedition, the old soul had already devised a brilliant, low-risk strategy for farming monster materials. Equipped with heavy travel gear and a tight face mask, he kneels quietly in the gloomy, bone-scattered cavern to prepare his lethal trap. By igniting a specialized concoction of rare medicinal herbs inside a small brazier, he releases a heavy stream of intoxicating green smoke. The toxic fumes quickly fill the entire cave, leaving the massive crystal spiders completely paralyzed and twitching helplessly on the cold stone floor. With the deadly monster horde immobilized and completely ripe for harvest, our 9-year-old menace gathers his mana, tightly compressing the magic deep inside his body. He unleashes a scorching purification flame, instantly incinerating the helpless beasts and turning the entire spider nest into piles of ash. Demonstrating an incredible level of high-tier magic control, our 9-year-old menace executes a complex phase-shifted multi-circuit fire spell with surgical precision. By splitting his internal mana pathways simultaneously, the silver-haired mastermind prepares to wipe out the paralyzed monster horde without wasting a single drop of excess energy. With a swift, decisive motion, a scorching beam of pure flame erupts across the dark cavern floor, violently detonating on impact with terrifying power. The massive explosion instantly incinerates the helpless beasts, transforming the once deadly spider nest into a roaring furnace of white-hot purification flames. Walking straight through the raging inferno like it is just another casual stroll, the little general watches cold-bloodedly as the remaining crystal spiders collapse and burn to crisp ashes. His tactical smoke trap worked flawlessly, completely obliterating the threat while securing the underground zone for harvest. Sweating profusely from the immense heat radiating off the burning walls, Lil Bro unceremoniously strips off his heavy fur coat and drops it onto the stone floor. But as he advances deeper into the subterranean complex, the environment takes a drastic, punishing turn into freezing sub-zero darkness. Stepping onto a slick sheet of blue ice, our boy instantly regrets his hasty decision as biting, sub-zero winds cut straight through his thin clothes. He shivers uncontrollably, hugging his arms tightly while pushing forward into the unknown depths of the treacherous frozen cavern. Before he can even think about turning back for his discarded coat, an unsettling survival instinct forces him to freeze in place. Looking up at the icy ceiling, his eyes widen in grim realization as he finds hundreds of massive, translucent monster egg sacs hanging directly over his head. Suddenly, a heavy, reverberating thump echoes through the frozen chamber, sending violent shockwaves straight through the ice. Cold sweat drips down his face as the heavy vibrations ripple through the darkness, threatening to rupture the fragile egg sacs and unleash a deadly monster swarm. Maintaining the sharp mind of a veteran archmage, he instantly channels mana to conjure a brilliant fireball in his hand. With a forceful throw, he launches the burning orb straight down the dark, icy tunnel to illuminate the shadows and locate whatever colossal creature is creating the disturbance. However, blasting high-tier fire magic inside a fragile glacial cave triggers immediate catastrophic consequences. The sudden surge of heat instantly destabilizes the frozen ground, causing deep fractures to spiderweb across the ice directly beneath his feet as the subterranean floor begins to collapse. Before Lil Bro can even regain his footing, a colossal crystal spider drops from the icy ceiling like a nightmare, locking its glowing red eyes straight onto its target. Caught completely off guard on the treacherous glacial ground, our boy barely has time to react as death looms directly over his head. Narrowly avoiding getting impaled by razor-sharp legs, the young mage dives backward in desperation, crashing onto the frozen cavern floor with violent force. The sheer impact sends painful shockwaves through his frail frame, leaving him scrambling on hands and knees to create distance on the slick, unforgiving terrain. Gritting his teeth through the throbbing pain, Lil Bro frantically pushes himself back across the ice as the towering arachnid stalks forward. Exhaling a freezing cloud of sub-zero frost, the predatory monster locks onto the defenseless child, ready to slice him to ribbons. As deadly icy spears slam down around him, the little general channels his remaining magic, unleashing a scorching fireball straight into the creature's monster face. The high-tier blaze detonates with a violent roar, searing the beast's carapace and forcing it back. Conjuring another flame, the silver-haired mastermind feels a wave of intense dizziness wash over him. Pushing a 12-year-old body without prior combat experience to cast high-level spells all day after staying up all night is rapidly pushing his physical limits to the absolute brink. As ominous thuds echo through the dark cavern and the beast closes in again, cold sweat drips down our boy's tense face. Even while struggling against total exhaustion, his veteran mind locked in high gear searches frantically for a tactical exploit to break the deadly deadlock. See, back before heading into this perilous dungeon, he recalled the fresh bread packed for his travels and the kind woman departing on a snowy carriage ride. Connecting the dots in an instant, a cold, confident smirk spreads across the young genius's face as a brilliant plan takes shape. Unstrapping his shovel with lightning speed, our boy effortlessly slips his heavy travel pack off his shoulders. Adjusting his grip while standing firm on the frozen ground, the 12-year-old menace prepares to execute a daring distraction play to swing the battle in his favor. Putting everything into the throw, Lil Bro hurls his bulky backpack straight at the creature's gaping jaw. The monster instantly unleashes its frigid power, freezing the airborne bag into solid ice and giving our hero the crucial opening he needs to strike back. As the frozen backpack shatters against the glacial wall, a massive cloud of icy debris explodes across the dark cavern. Unfazed by the blinding spray, the enraged crystal spider thrashes violently through the falling ice, its glowing crimson eyes locking onto the child with terrifying intensity. Taking complete advantage of the monster's momentary confusion, our boy vaults across the slick glacial floor with explosive speed. Gripping his heavy metal shovel with both hands, the 12-year-old menace leaps directly into the beast's blind spot to execute a ruthless close-quarters assault. Putting his entire body weight behind the blow, he plants the shovel blade straight into the creature's gaping maw. The heavy impact fractures the spider's carapace with a sickening crunch, sending dark fluid spraying across the ice as the little general kicks off to reset his distance. Razor-sharp legs slash viciously through the dark cavern air, forcing Lil Bro to slide uncontrollably across the slick terrain. Gritting his teeth through the brutal momentum, he digs his gloved fingers deep into the frozen ground, instantly stabilizing his position before the monster can react. The wounded beast shrieks in absolute fury, towering over the exhausted young mage with its razor-sharp mandibles wide open for the kill. Yet even caught directly beneath the monster's shadow, the silver-haired mastermind remains totally unshakable, preparing to unleash his ultimate tactical counterstrike. Refusing to waste precious mana on standard fire spells, he draws upon 60 years of high-tier arcana mastery. By tightly compressing dense magic inside his open palm, the flickering flame rapidly condenses, transforming into an insanely hot, hyper-focused sphere of scorching blue heat. Pouring his remaining magic into the spell, the young genius shouts with fierce conviction as he unleashes the compressed blue blaze straight upward. The scorching beam erupts with explosive force, violently blasting through the crystal spider's chest and illuminating the dark cavern. Cold sweat drips down his pale, exhausted face as the white-hot blue inferno completely engulfs the screeching monster. The devastating heat burns through the creature's reinforced body from the inside out, vaporizing the subterranean apex predator into crisp ashes and sealing another tactical triumph. The deadly monster roars with intense blue flames and lunges forward at blinding speed, driving its razor-sharp icy legs straight for an instant kill. Trapped beneath the beast's suffocating pressure, our boy grits his teeth in sheer desperation, straining every muscle just to dodge the strike and withstand the crushing impact of the assault. Refusing to yield an inch, he thrusts his hand forward to disrupt the creature's magic flow at point-blank range. The sudden surge of raw energy violently detonates the beast from the inside, erupting in blue flames while the brutal recoil hurls our exhausted young mage backward onto the cold, bloody ice. As the heavy smoke clears over the cavern floor, the monster's shattered body dissolves into energy, revealing a pristine blue mana crystal gleaming on the frost. Claiming this high-grade core proves our 9-year-old menace successfully turned a suicidal gamble into a complete tactical triumph through pure combat instinct. See, back inside the estate walls, panic had already spread like wildfire among the household staff. With their young master vanishing without a trace into the deadly frozen terrain, the anxious servants paced the stone halls in absolute terror, deeply dreading that he had fallen prey to wild beasts. Limping out of the dark cave into the sunlight, our boy slowly makes his way back toward the mountain village. The moment his frantic guardian spots him stumbling down the dirt road, the man rushes forward without hesitation and tightly wraps the battered child in a desperate, tearful embrace. Waking up inside a warm bedroom with bandages plastered across his face, Lil Bro opens his eyes to find his attendant holding his hand over his heart in overwhelming relief. Seeing a grown warrior practically crying tears of joy over his survival leaves our old battle-hardened mage feeling hilariously flustered and embarrassed. Sitting up carefully on the bed, he learns that he was completely out cold for half a day while his body recovered from the strain. The household maid clutches her chest in emotional relief, deeply moved and tearfully thanking heaven that their young master made it back alive from the wilderness. Our boy nervously twiddles his fingers beneath the blanket, casting a quiet glance over to the adjacent bed where the sick child is now sleeping soundly. Realizing his perilous dungeon raid successfully secured the exact cure needed to save a life, a soft, satisfied smile finally appears on his face. Elsewhere, search guards enter the icy subterranean cavern holding lanterns, fully prepared for a brutal monster encounter. Instead, they stand paralyzed in absolute shock at the sight of giant winter spiders slaughtered across the floor, completely clueless that a 9-year-old kid wiped out the entire nest single-handedly. Sitting up in his warm bed, our boy glances over as the household maid steps inside the bedroom, carrying a basket overflowing with fresh red apples. Staring at the crisp fruit, he casually reaches out to grab one, paying no mind to the heavy emotional atmosphere lingering among his worried caretakers. As the anxious maid watches him intently, Lil Bro raises the apple high and takes a big crunching bite without saying a word. Seeing their young master eating with such healthy vigor washes away all her fear, leaving her clutching her apron as tears of profound relief swell in her eyes. Seeing her overcome with emotional relief, a smug, satisfied smirk spreads across our 9-year-old menace's face. He successfully turned a deadly suicide raid into a complete tactical triumph, securing the cure for the sick child, and proving that his combat instincts as an ancient archmage remain as sharp as ever. The very next morning, rest is the last thing on this battle-hardened veteran's mind. Pushing his small, undeveloped body past its physical limits, our little general sprints violently back and forth across the frozen courtyard, his heavy breathing fogging up in the crisp winter air as he refuses to slow his pace. Every grueling step is a calculated effort to force his physical frame into expanding its internal mana circuits. In his previous life, he learned the hard way that an unconditioned vessel will crumble under high-tier magic pressure, making relentless physical endurance just as critical to his survival as mastering high-level spells. Maintaining absolute mental focus while driving an untrained body into extreme exhaustion requires staggering willpower. When the physical body breaks down, the mind collapses right alongside it, so our boy grits his teeth in sheer determination and pushes forward even as his muscles scream from severe fatigue. A sudden flashback of Lucas smiling brightly while practicing with a wooden sword flashes through his mind, fueling his burning determination. Clutching his chest tightly as his heart thunders in his ribs, Lil Bro locks in with a cold glance, resolved to build overwhelming power to protect his people this time. His intense physical conditioning is suddenly cut short as the estate butler walks toward the courtyard fountain, accompanied by a visiting physician carrying a heavy leather medical kit. Pausing his high-speed laps, our exhausted young master wipes the dripping sweat from his brow and catches his breath to face the newcomers. The physician bows with deep formal respect, ready to evaluate the young lord's health after his dangerous ordeal. Refusing to waste any precious time going inside, Lil Bro takes a seat directly on the cold stone fountain edge, instructing the doctor to conduct the examination right here in the open courtyard. The visiting physician places a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder, offering warm comfort after the dangerous wilderness incident. But our little general remains completely stoic and unbothered by the dramatic show of concern. Unlatching the heavy leather straps of his medical case, the doctor prepares to display his clinical supply of specialized remedies. Inside the case rest rows of glowing purple vials containing panacea, a rare medicinal compound widely known for its potent restorative properties. Taking one of the glass bottles into his small hands, Lil Bro examines the shimmering liquid with a keen, highly trained eye, immediately measuring its chemical purity and magic concentration. Drawing directly upon his past life as a legendary Archmage, he instantly recognizes the true underlying function of this formula. This isn't merely standard medicine for common illnesses. It acts as a high-tier internal stabilizer, perfectly designed for smoothing out the chaotic mana flow raging within his unconditioned vessel. Concluding the outdoor checkup, the physician bows with formal respect and promises to return next month before walking away down the stone path. Our boy casually takes full possession of the heavy medical chest, successfully claiming a crucial resource to fuel his secret physical and magical training. The moment the doctor disappears down the walkway, the estate butler turns his sharp eyes toward the young lord, his expression darkening with heavy suspicion. Completely unfazed by the sudden shift in atmosphere, our 9-year-old menace offers only a smug, confident smirk in response. The tension beside the fountain spikes to dangerous levels as the butler steps forward, projecting a heavy wave of authority across the stone courtyard. He questions how a previously weak child could suddenly handle such intense physical strain, placing Lil Bro under a brutal verbal interrogation. Leaning down into his face with an intensely sharp gaze, the butler scrutinizes every detail of the boy's posture, searching for answers behind his radical change in behavior. Caught beneath the old man's suffocating aura, our little general keeps his composure even as a single drop of sweat rolls down his face. Refusing to yield a single step, our boy reaches forward to take control of the leather medical case. The butler immediately locks his gloved hand over the handle as well, creating a tense physical standoff in the center of the courtyard as neither side backs down. Utilizing ancient knowledge from his previous life, the boy calmly delivers an advanced, flawless explanation regarding internal mana stabilization that no 9-year-old child could ever possess. Paralyzed by this impossible demonstration of high-level intelligence, the butler slowly loosens his grip, his suspicion completely shattering into silent awe. Standing tall without flinching, our 9-year-old menace calmly explains the complex mechanics of internal mana channels with flawless authority. Paralyzed by this impossible display of high-tier Archmage knowledge coming from a child, the butler's sharp suspicion completely shatters into silent, overwhelmed awe. Later that night, inside his dimly lit study, the estate butler sits at his desk writing a secret, comprehensive report. He carefully documents every detail of the young master's sudden physical recovery and unnatural power, deeply unsettled by the boy's terrifyingly vast grasp of magic principles. A sudden knock at the heavy door shatters the midnight silence lingering inside the administrator's office. Pausing his quill mid-sentence, the monocled butler looks up from his desk as a pale, terrified housemaid cautiously opens the door and peeks inside. Clutching her apron with trembling hands, she steps into the study to deliver a deeply disturbing report regarding the household staff. Her voice cracks with intense panic as tears stream down her face, revealing that something dreadful has happened to their fellow servant Annette. At that same time, deep beneath the estate in a dark stone dungeon, a missing maid lies bound tightly in ropes on the cold ground, confirming that a sinister conspiracy is already in motion right under everyone's nose. Out in the estate courtyard, servants whisper in quiet panic about another maid missing without a trace. While a lazy butler claims she simply fled the hard labor, the maids know she worked tirelessly to pay off her family debts and would never abandon her post without saying a single word. That same arrogant butler taunts the women, smugly insisting their coworker got sick of taking orders from nobility. But as tempers flare, he drops a far more sinister theory, smirking arrogantly as he hints that dark magic forbidden rituals might be responsible for these eerie disappearances across the domain. Meanwhile, inside the castle, our reawakened 70-year-old mage starts awake from a restless sleep. Surveying the vast silent mansion, he senses the insidious rot festering within the house of the frontier count, realizing sinister schemes are already unfolding right under his family's nose. Back in the courtyard, that loudmouthed servant keeps pushing his luck, openly mocking the master's authority. But the loyal red-haired maid snaps, stepping up aggressively to defend the family honor before this trashy worker can spew another word of poisonous slander. Before the heated argument explodes, heavy footsteps echo across the cobblestones. The arrogant servant turns around in cold terror, only to see our lil bro standing tall, looking down on him like an apex predator sizing up helpless prey. Caught red-handed disrespecting the Lord's bloodline, the butler trembles like a leaf under that suffocating gaze. The 9-year-old menace does not even need to raise his voice to send a wave of absolute dread crashing through the insolent worker's mind. Our boy quickly connects the sinister pattern behind the castle walls. First, the maid Hilda vanished without a trace, then Clara went missing weeks later, and now Annette never returned after going to weekend mass, confirming a silent killer is systematically hunting down the staff. Up in his private study, the little general corners the nervous servant for interrogation. Piercing him with an icy glare that radiates lethal intent, our boy makes it crystal clear that lying is not an option if the man wants to leave this room alive. Calmly sitting behind his desk, the young master offers a deal, promising complete immunity if the servant spills every detail he knows. Trapped under relentless tactical pressure, the trembling worker swallows hard, realizing his only path to survival is confessing every dirty secret. Back inside the private study, the arrogant servant Bill attempts to play off his insolent slander with a nervous chuckle and a smug smirk. He foolishly believes he can weave cheap excuses right under his master's nose, completely unaware that he is trying to pull a fast one on a reawakened archmage. The study plunges into suffocating darkness as our boy sits motionless behind his massive wooden desk. Coldly uttering the servant's name with calm, lethal precision, the little general unleashes a crushing wave of magical pressure that instantly shatters the butler's arrogant front into screams of bone-chilling terror. When the trembling worker frantically stammers religious excuses about human life being a sacred gift, the young master just flashes a razor-sharp, sinister smile. Trapped under relentless tactical pressure, the sniveling coward drops to his knees, clutching his hands together as he desperately begs for his life. Activating his ancient mana perception, our 70-year-old mage systematically reconstructs the sinister timeline of missing household staff. The sudden vanishing of the maid Annette proves that the threat plaguing the estate isn't an accident. A silent killer is systematically hunting down and liquidating every single potential witness inside the castle. He traces the origin of this deadly conspiracy back to where the dominoes first fell, right after Hans and his beloved nanny met their sudden, untimely deaths. With his childhood guardians completely eliminated, the Frontier Count's mansion was left entirely vulnerable to insidious traitors operating right under his family's nose. Shifting his tactical focus, suspicion falls heavily onto the secretive household staff. Shattered across the carpet floor lies a crushed glass vial oozing lethal purple poison, tainted by fresh drops of crimson blood that betray a violent, concealed confrontation that took place inside the private quarters. The 9-year-old menace corners the panicked maids directly over the bloody evidence. As the red-haired servant flinches and winces under his terrifying gaze, her trembling posture and guilty eyes confirm she knows exactly who spilled that deadly toxin across the floor and why it was brought into the room. Enveloping the room in a dark crimson aura of absolute bloodlust, the ancient archmage grimly details the horrific reality of taking a life. He speaks with chilling first-hand authority, describing the permanent psychological scar of being forced to execute someone you once cared about with your own bare hands. Clenching his blood-stained fist with unwavering resolve, his suffocating aura leaves the terrified servants paralyzed in pure dread. Standing before them like a hardened conqueror, the young master makes it crystal clear that anyone betraying the family will be met with swift, brutal, and ruthless destruction. The heavy silence inside the room grows suffocating as the maid stares ahead in deep remorse, quietly lamenting that she failed to extend a helping hand before tragedy struck. Standing stiffly before her young master, she faces the cold, unforgiving reality of the insidious threat lurking within the Frontier Count's mansion. Looking down at the pool of dark purple poison oozing across the floorboards, our boy corners the trembling house staff with relentless pressure. The red-haired maid winces beneath his piercing gaze, fully aware that another slip-up or lie will result in immediate ruthless execution. With crimson blood lingering on his hand, the 9-year-old menace retreats to his private quarters to process these critical clues. Sitting quietly on the edge of his bed, he ignites a flick of blue magic from his fingertips, calculating his next move against the shadowy traitors operating in the dark. A firm knock on the door interrupts his concentration as the servant Bill enters to deliver his full confession. The little general listens attentively while the worker explains how predatory brokers target vulnerable estate staff, luring them away with empty promises of freedom before liquidating them in secret. Bill nonchalantly describes how unsuspecting maids packing heavy suitcases were funneled out to shady figures past the perimeter walls. Resting his chin on his hand, the ancient Archmage systematically maps out the entire human trafficking ring that has been quietly draining the mansion's headcount. Observing the boy's calm demeanor, Bill smugly scoffs in secret, foolishly convincing himself that a child is easily misled. Flashing a greedy grin and rubbing his fingers together, the corrupt servant attempts to secure a massive financial payout, completely oblivious to the ancient soul sizing him up. Rather than wiping out the arrogant worker, our boy keeps a stone-faced expression and strategically plays into the man's greed. Pointing toward the official document laying on the desk, he gives instructions that leave the sniveling butler practically glowing with joy at the thought of a reward. Flashing a sinister, composed smile, the reawakened mage allows the servant to celebrate his perceived victory. As Bill pumps his fist in triumph, seeing his master as nothing more than a golden goose, he has no idea he just walked straight into a lethal trap. Excited by the promise of a massive payout, the corrupt servant eagerly offers to lead his master straight to the human trafficking brokers right away. He laughs ecstatically in secret, utterly convinced he has successfully tricked a naive child into funding his greed. But his celebration ends in pure terror when reality snaps into place. Instead of counting coins, the sniveling traitor wakes up stripped down to his underwear inside a frozen dungeon cell, screaming in absolute horror as the cold iron bars seal his fate. As the trapped butler desperately screams in confusion, our little general stands outside the cell with an icy glare. Holding a glowing magic crystal in hand, the reawakened Archmage smirks calmly, keeping absolute control of the investigation after completely ensnaring his target. Deep inside a subterranean sewer dungeon, a desperate scammer clutches the iron bars of his cell until his knuckles turn white. See, this greedy crook thought he had stumbled onto easy prey when he targeted a traveling boy. But playing dirty tricks on a former 10th-class Archmage reborn into a 9-year-old body is a fatal miscalculation that carries immediate consequences. Just hours earlier outside the city walls, the swindler spotted our boy arriving by carriage at night under the cover of a hooded cloak. The scammer claimed to be an exiled noble seeking safe passage south. But the moment his greedy eyes caught the kid's high-end cloak and expensive gem brooch glowing in the dark, his mind immediately pivoted toward extortion. He assumed this quiet, silver-haired boy was just another soft, defenseless aristocrat ready to be bled dry. Smirking with wicked confidence, the low-life criminal began setting his extortion trap in the dark alleyway, absolutely certain that a helpless 9-year-old noble would surrender his wealth without putting up any fight against basic street tricks. Instead, immediate payback hit him like a freight train. Before the scoundrel could even process what went wrong with his plan, he woke up stripped down to his underwear inside a filthy dungeon cell, raging against the heavy iron bars in utter humiliation while spinning around his grim prison in sheer disbelief. Meanwhile, our silver-haired menace casually stands outside the cage inspecting a glowing magic crystal. He ponders whether he needs to condense his mana further to match the ancient magic texts, taking a calm breath to refine his mana while completely ignoring the half-naked idiot throwing a noisy tantrum right in front of him. The stripped swindler points his finger and bellows in rage, demanding to know how a 9-year-old is walking around freely in the corridor while he is trapped like an animal. But our boy doesn't waste a single breath arguing back. He simply turns around with icy blue eyes, examining the heavy iron lock with cold, tactical calculation. With a nonchalant wave of his finger, invisible mana flares up and rips the reinforced cell door completely off its hinges. The heavy metal gate crashes down onto the stone floor with a deafening screech, leaving the criminal wide-mouthed and trembling like a homeless person on Christmas at the absurd display of destructive power. The moment the barrier crumbles, the crook's arrogant attitude vanishes instantly, clasping his hands together and pleading for mercy like a terrified child. But the loud collapse echoes straight through the dark tunnels of the underground water channels, drawing the attention of two armed dungeon guards who step out to investigate the sudden destruction. Panic takes over as the underwear-clad swindler scrambles out of his cell, desperately shouting for the young master to wait before dropping straight onto his knees. He hits the stone floor with a loud thud, completely prostrating himself after realizing the 9-year-old standing before him holds total power over his fate and freedom and cannot be trifled with. Our young master halts his stride, turning back with an icy predatory glare that cuts straight through the damp dungeon air. He looks down at the groveling crook with absolute superiority, demanding full submission as he prepares to deliver a decisive ultimatum that this petty thief will have no choice but to obey. Before being thrown into this damp sewer cell, Bill had already tasted absolute terror out in the icy forest. Bound tightly in thick ropes, the pathetic scammer sobbed uncontrollably in sheer panic, while the territory's noble lord stood over him with a drawn sword, ready to execute him on the spot for daring to target his precious silver-haired young heir. The lord's heavy steel rested against the frozen ground, enforcing an immediate death sentence for any scoundrel foolish enough to threaten high nobility. While the stern butler barked out furious reprimands at the captive thief, our silver-haired menace stood completely unbothered, calmly inspecting the scene, while watching the trembling criminal weep in the snow without showing a single drop of sympathy. Tears and cold sweat streamed down the fraudster's face as he prostrated himself in the bloody snow, desperately begging the noble lord to spare his miserable life. But our former archmage maintained a deadly calm, staring down at the groveling crook with razor-sharp blue eyes while dissecting every detail of his story to uncover his true motives and hidden operations. Our young master calculates every piece of evidence in seconds flat, realizing Bill's claim of losing all his silver coins was an outright lie. In reality, this greedy criminal had been systematically fencing stolen noble heirlooms and ancient magic texts to illegal underground buyers while keeping helpless servants bound and gagged inside secret hideouts across the territory. These corrupt black market syndicates fester throughout the city of Goethe like a toxic mold, preying on ordinary citizens from the dark alleys. But the moment an official imperial warrant with a bright crimson wax seal is brandished right before Bill's eyes, the criminal's arrogant facade completely shatters, leaving him cornered with zero room for escape or denial. Meanwhile, deep inside a shadowy underground hideout, 3 nervous gang members stand at attention, trembling before their monstrous crime boss. The hulking leader quietly carves into a thick piece of steak at his dining table, but his calm demeanor instantly turns into murderous venom as news of their botched robbery operation reaches his ears. Sitting right beside a weathered human skull impaled on a wooden pike, a brutal reminder of how he handles incompetent failures, the ruthless boss fixes his subordinates with a lethal glare. The terrified henchman gasps for air in sheer panic as a heavy, suffocating aura of pure violence completely engulfs the entire dark stone chamber. Before the trembling thug can even utter a single word of defense, the enraged boss erupts across the wooden table with explosive velocity. In one terrifying display of raw physical force, he grips the helpless subordinate by his throat and hoists his entire body straight into the air like a weightless ragdoll. Fresh blood splatters across the ruthless commander's face as he mercilessly crushes his own follower to teach the rest of the gang an unforgettable lesson. The remaining 2 thugs watch in frozen, horror-stricken silence, knowing full well that any further disappointment will mean an instant and violent death for them all. Back inside the shadowy depths of the syndicate's underground hideout, an oppressive, deathly silence engulfs the stone chamber immediately after the ruthless crime boss completes his brutal execution. The lifeless body of their incompetent comrade lies face down on the damp stone floor in a rapidly spreading pool of crimson blood, serving as a horrific, unforgettable warning of what happens to anyone foolish enough to botch a critical assignment under this monster's unforgiving command. Paralyzed with pure terror, the 2 remaining henchmen fall straight to their knees, desperately trying to catch their breath while trembling in uncontrollable horror. Wiping cold sweat from their pale, frozen faces, they struggle to scramble back up against the cold stone wall, fully aware that standing in the presence of this unhinged murderer means even a single wrong word or hesitant breath could instantly land them dead beside the fresh corpse. Suddenly, heavy footfalls echo through the dark stone archway outside, instantly freezing both henchmen in sheer dread. They peek around the heavy doorway with wide, bloodshot eyes, their hearts pounding violently against their ribs as an overwhelming predatory aura slowly creeps closer down the damp, torch-lit corridor, signaling an approaching presence that threatens to completely shatter whatever fragile safety they had left in this gloomy dungeon. Tension inside the damp underground hallway escalates to a dangerous peak as both thugs swallow hard, their throats completely dry from escalating panic. As an intimidating silhouette emerges from the deep gloom, the dark, suffocating aura radiating off the approaching figure crushes any lingering hopes of escape for the terrified syndicate members as they brace themselves for a brutal and lethal confrontation. The thugs erupt into horror-filled screams as a blood-drenched killer steps straight into the flickering torchlight. Staring into a pair of unhinged, wide-open eyes glowing with pure murderous malice, their legs completely collapse beneath them, knocking both men backward onto the stone tiles, while sheer, unadulterated terror takes absolute control over their shattered minds. With slow, menacing precision, heavy combat boots step forward while a strong hand firmly grips a massive, blood-coated butcher cleaver. The razor-sharp steel edge glints ominously under the low light, sealing the stone chamber into an inescapable death trap as the ruthless killer corners his helpless prey like terrified cattle waiting for the final slaughter. Gripping his hair with a sinister, twisted grin, the bloodthirsty commander fixes his cowering subordinates with an utterly psychotic glare. Fresh blood trickles down his menacing smirk as he thrives on their helpless agony, delivering an unmistakable, brutal promise that any further failure in their illegal black market operations will end in their immediate, gruesome execution on the spot. Two helpless survivors cringe in absolute terror on the stone floor, trembling like homeless men on Christmas right beside a severed head. Heavy boots crush the dungeon floor as a blood-splattered intruder steps into the torchlight, tightening his grip on a brutal meat cleaver. Death is standing directly over them now, and there is nowhere left to run. Sweat pours down the prisoner's face as sheer terror consumes him, fully expecting a ruthless execution on the spot. But instead of swinging his blade down, our silver-haired general unexpectedly pulls out a contract scroll. With a calm, menacing smile, Lil Bro stands tall in the dark cell, presenting a binding offer that nobody saw coming. The captive stares back in complete shock and horror. Holding the massive cleaver in one hand and the scroll in the other, our boy casually explains that activating this magic requires a blood sacrifice, and this knife will do nicely. Hostile shouts suddenly echo down the corridor, but our young general doesn't lose his cool composure for a single second. Panic explodes inside the dungeon cell as heavy footsteps thunder down the stone stairs. Enemy reinforcements are rushing in to kill them both, leaving zero time left for hesitation or second thoughts. The prisoner winces in pure dread, realizing that they have reached the absolute point of no return with armed guards charging the door. Without missing a single beat, our 9-year-old menace slashes open the captive's finger with the heavy cleaver. He forcefully presses the bloody fingertip onto the ancient parchment, triggering a violent surge of glowing blue mana that bursts through the entire room, instantly sealing their binding magical contract and securing total allegiance on the spot. Our boy smirks with total confidence as ancient magic swirls around his body. Just then, 3 armed thugs burst through the doorway with drawn weapons, roaring for blood. But before the attackers can even take another step, our general unleashes a swift kinetic shockwave, blasting all 3 enemies straight across the face simultaneously. The heavy smoke clears to reveal all 3 thugs crashed like trash, lying completely unconscious with swirling eyes on the stone floor. Our young general casually holds his glowing mana orb, leaving the shirtless captive completely paralyzed in utter shock at this insane and effortless display of overwhelming combat power. Catching a glowing blue mana crystal smoothly in his palm, our master mage secures his valuable magical prize. With the dungeon cell completely cleared and his attackers knocked out cold on the ground, the path forward leads deep into the flooded underground sewer network where a much larger conspiracy awaits our hero. Moving deeper through the damp stone corridor, our newly bound servant can barely contain his total awe, staring in complete disbelief at the young boy's absurd combat strength. But our silver-haired general isn't listening to any compliments. He carefully inspects the glowing frost mana stone, resting in his palm, feeling its potent elemental mana hum with immense cold magic. Suddenly, the follower freezes in his tracks as a lone patrol guard appears up ahead in the dark hallway. He nervously shrinks back against the stone wall, peeking around the pillar to check if their presence was spotted. Yet our 9-year-old menace remains completely unbothered, stepping straight into the open corridor with absolute tactical composure. Gathering the ambient moisture floating in the dungeon air, our boy effortlessly condenses the damp atmosphere into a swirling high-pressure sphere of water magic right above his palm. The terrified follower cowers behind a stone wall, utterly stunned by how casually Lil Bro summons raw elemental power without even chanting a single spell. The sentry turns his head in confusion, sensing the sudden shift in atmospheric pressure a fraction of a second too late. With a swift flick of his wrist and a piercing blue glare, our boy hurls the compressed water projectile straight down the corridor, unleashing a devastating wave of kinetic shock force right into the target. The pressurized magical impact slams head-on into the sentry's chest, throwing his entire body backward like a ragdoll down the arched corridor. He hits the hard stone floor with a violent crash, eyes rolling back as he gets knocked out cold long before he can even shout an alert to the rest of the underground facility. Confidently stepping forward right past the unconscious guard, our young master keeps his glowing water orb hovering while admiring his newly acquired frost mana stone crystal. He flashes a cool, calculating smirk, fully aware that securing this rare magical catalyst will dramatically expand his combat capabilities and mana reserves during this dangerous dungeon escape. The follower cautiously pokes the fallen enemy with his heavy meat cleaver, confirming the target is completely unconscious with swirling eyes on the stone floor. But when he glances back up at our boy, the sinister and chillingly confident smirk on the young general's face sends an eerie shiver straight down the servant's spine. Two more hostile guards suddenly round the stone corner, shouting in absolute shock after discovering their escaped merchandise standing freely in the main passage. Without showing a single second of hesitation, our master mage sweeps his arm forward, instantly blasting both unsuspecting guards straight across their faces with an overwhelming dual kinetic shockwave. Heavy leather boots crush the stone floor as a massive, battle-hardened warrior steps straight into the torchlight. The shirtless follower recoils in absolute terror, gripping his meat cleaver with trembling hands, but our silver-haired menace doesn't lose his cool for a single second, calmly sizing up this dangerous opponent. As the captive panics next to him, our 9-year-old menace flashes a chillingly confident smirk. Accessing the potent elemental energy stored inside his newly acquired frost mana stone, a violent surge of high-pressure icy magic swirls into existence around his palm, illuminating the dark stone hallway. With a casual flick of his wrist, our boy manifests a deadly razor-sharp ice spear hovering right beside his shoulder. The hostile intruder squints in surprise, but before he can even react or draw a weapon, our young master launches the high-velocity spell straight down the corridor. The ice projectile detonates with a violent blast, slamming directly into the warrior's chest in a cloud of frozen mist. But to the servant's utter shock, the hulking brute merely grunts in pain, shaking off a point-blank elemental hit like a total tank as he keeps moving forward. Closing the gap in the blink of an eye, the giant warrior looms over them with a dark, menacing grin. Yet our little general doesn't flinch or retreat a single inch, keeping his sharp blue gaze fixed on his opponent while silently preparing his true counterattack. With an aura of dark threat surrounding him, the intruder extends his hand toward the helpless follower, who screams in absolute agony that he's just an innocent human caught in the middle. But right before those crushing fingers can make contact, Lil Bro unleashes his hidden trap. A massive, razor-sharp spike of solid ice violently erupts straight out of the stone ground behind the enemy, impaling his torso cleanly from the back. Blood sprays across the cold corridor as our young general effortlessly maintains control over the spell, delivering a lethal counterstrike out of nowhere. Coughing up a heavy spurt of blood, the giant opponent collapses forward, crashing onto the cold floor, knocked completely out of commission. Standing victorious right beside the bloody body, our cold-blooded menace and his terrified follower prepare to navigate deeper into the enemy facility. Standing face-to-face in the damp hallway, our silver-haired menace lays down a strict, non-negotiable command. Tightening his white knuckle grip around the heavy meat cleaver, the nervous follower breaks into a cold sweat, realizing he has zero choice but to obey his new master without a single second of hesitation. Without missing a beat, the servant bolts straight down the corridor, charging deeper past the defeated intruder. Left standing alone, our 9-year-old general leans back against the cold brick wall and slowly closes his eyes, letting a heavy memory wash over his mind. See, back at the Grand Estate, a loyal maid knelt before him, gently taking his blood-stained hand into her own. She carefully wiped away the crimson splatter with tender devotion, treating the young master's wounds while swearing her complete allegiance to his side. Our silver-haired boy stared down with absolute stoicism, accepting her quiet oath as the weight of his noble lineage. That same cold, unyielding resolve now drives every single tactical decision he makes inside this underground hellhole. Snapping straight back to reality, our little menace watches the shadow-drenched hallway like a hawk, Inside the dark cells, captive maids huddle together in dread, their golden eyes locked onto the chaos unfolding right outside their iron bars. Meanwhile, high above the subterranean tunnels, the Grand Castle gates stand tall under a starlit night sky. With his servant deployed and the entire facility thrown into pure turmoil, our cold-blooded protagonist prepares to unleash his ultimate getaway strategy. Back at the mansion quarters, the maids sit around the table mending laundry while light conversation fills the room. But as two of them lean in to whisper hushed rumors about recent disappearances, the comfortable atmosphere shifts instantly into something far more ominous. This is a crazy level of tension. The cheerful tone vanishes the moment dark secrets come to light. Listening to the horrific rumors being whispered right beside her, our brown-haired maid freezes mid-stitch. Cold sweat breaks out across her face as the sheer horror of what she just heard sinks into her mind. Realizing the severe threat lurking under their noses, she breaks away to seek an immediate audience with our boy. Sitting at his grand desk, the silver-haired general clasps his hands and listens attentively, while she nods grimly to confirm every terrifying detail of her report. Her eyes tremble as she delivers the gruesome truth. The subterranean sewers running beneath the domain aren't just abandoned drainage tunnels, but a lawless black market underworld. It is a literal slaughterhouse where innocent human beings are bought, sold, and consumed like meat in the dark. As she speaks, traumatic memories of that nightmare flood her mind. She remembers standing behind heavy iron bars deep underground, trapped in a pitch-black cell with zero hope of escape, while strange, malevolent energy hovered outside the iron door of her dungeon prison. Dread choked every breath as she watched her fellow captive shiver uncontrollably on the cold stone floor. Trembling from the sheer trauma, she relives the agonizing horror of waiting in the dark for her turn at the hands of those underground monsters. She recalls her hand shaking violently against the cold iron bars, desperate for a rescue that never came. Our boy locks his blue eyes onto her with razor-sharp focus, absorbing every piece of critical intelligence as she completes her grim report. Back in the quiet study, silence hangs heavy in the air. The maid hesitates nervously before his desk, unable to shake off the mental scars of holding her fellow captive's hand while huddled together in that filthy cell, praying to survive. Trembling like a homeless person on Christmas, she bites her finger as intense anxiety consumes her. But sitting across from her, the little general rests his chin in deep calculation, calmly analyzing the structure of the enemy syndicate before planning his next move. Seeing his unshakable composure, the heavy tension melts away and a warm smile of relief washes over her face. The 9-year-old menace folds his arms with an annoyed scowl, fully prepared to march down into the shadows and crush this evil. Annette looks at our boy with deep admiration, confessing that he is the only noble in the entire estate who pays attention to humble maids like them. The little general locks his sharp gaze onto her, calmly speaking her name before deciding to postpone their conversation for later, keeping his true motives hidden. As she turns around to leave the study, our silver-haired prodigy subtly extends his hand and weaves a secret mana tracking spell without making a sound. Completely unaware of the glowing blue emblem embedded into her dress, Annette walks out of the room, marked for relentless surveillance by the young master. Meanwhile, out in the mansion courtyard, everyday life continues as maids sweep the grounds under the bright afternoon sun. A butler, carrying heavy stacks of cargo, weaves past them without drawing any suspicion, slipping quietly through a heavy wooden door that leads directly down into the dark subterranean storage chambers. Setting his heavy load down in the dim stone hallway, he is suddenly cornered by a group of menacing syndicate thugs stepping out of the shadows. Cold sweat breaks across the butler's brow as overwhelming panic grips his heart, forcing him to stammer out explanations under their cold, intimidating glares. See, earlier that evening, our Lil Bro cornered an underground operative in the dark alleyway to force out critical intelligence regarding their network. Threatened by the young master's ruthless demeanor, the terrified target cowered in fear, trembling helplessly as he surrendered every detail about the syndicate's hidden movements. Back inside the gloomy chamber, sinister phantom laughter echoes violently inside the butler's head as mental terror shatters his remaining composure. Unable to endure the overwhelming psychological pressure, he collapses face first onto the stacked cargo while the massive syndicate thugs look down on his pathetic state with absolute cruelty. Pulling himself up, the man flashes a smug, sinister grin, revealing his true allegiance to the illegal underground network. But the muscular thug leader bluntly declares that their boss has already arranged a special tribute, instantly shattering his confidence as fresh panic surges through his veins. The heavy-set brute looms over him like an iron fortress, demanding total obedience while the trembling spy realizes he has walked straight into a trap. Surrounded by ruthless criminals in a lawless underworld, one wrong step will spell his immediate execution. Back in his private quarters at night, the 9-year-old menace prepares himself for the upcoming slaughter. Concentrating high-density mana into his palm, a blazing golden flame ignites with violent intensity as our boy drops into a deadly offensive combat stance. With a vicious thrust of his arm, the silver-haired prodigy unleashes a massive fireball that tears through the air with terrifying force. As scorching flames illuminate the entire room, his cold blue eyes lock forward with absolute killer intent, fully prepared to burn the underground syndicate to dust. Summoning a sudden surge of sub-zero ice magic, our boy collides frost directly into his roaring fireball. The intense elemental reaction detonates inside the room, sending scorching steam and glowing embers blasting against the walls. Dispelling the dual magic with a quick snap of his fist, the silver-haired prodigy steps through the lingering frost. Cold blue sparks shower down around his boots, proving his flawless control over opposing mana types. Catching his breath after the intense spellcraft practice, the 9-year-old menace narrows his blue eyes in deep calculation. He knows raw power alone won't be enough when facing treacherous enemies lurking in the dark. Traumatic memories flood back of deceptive foes from his past who hid their true martial prowess under harmless disguises. His own previous ignorance cost him dearly, and he refuses to fall into the same fatal trap twice. His icy gaze sharpens with absolute resolve as he squeezes his fists so hard his knuckles turn white. The upcoming war against the underground syndicate requires ruthless execution and total tactical awareness. Exhausted from channeling such dense mana, our young master drops back onto his bed and stares up at the ceiling. Jonas's dying words echo inside his head, warning him about dangerous mages pulling strings behind the scenes. Closing his eyes beneath the starlit sky, he makes a silent vow to break past his current limits. To shield Goethe and crush every threat looming over the domain, he must become stronger than ever before. When morning light pierces through the curtains, his eyes snap open with instant combat readiness. Right on cue, house servants enter the spacious bedroom carrying a wooden wash basin and fresh linens to attend to him. As the butler stands guard near the doorway, the head maid quietly kneels right beside his bed. She carefully sets down the basin, preparing to assist the young master with his morning routine. Flashing a warm, gentle smile, she lifts a warm, damp cloth and softly wipes the sweat from his cheek. The sudden human tenderness catches our usually ruthless prodigy completely by surprise, sending his heart thumping violently against his ribs. Meanwhile, far across the region, a formidable warrior atop a dark horse charges across the stone bridge toward the fortress gate. Bearing a massive broadsword across his shoulders, this incoming figure arrives at the domain, signaling a major turning point in the battle to come. Locked inside a cold stone cell, the former Archmage spends his lonely days scribbling complex mana formulas across worn parchment, while decades of tally marks cover the wall. Every precise stroke of his pen records a lifetime of magic, preparing for the day he will rewrite destiny itself. Heavy boots echo through the dark dungeon as an old, battle-hardened follower steps through the doorway. The moment the veteran sees his legendary master confined like a common criminal, his eyes widen in disbelief, dropping his heavy travel gear straight to the floor. Refusing to wallow in disgrace, the old general requests a long-overdue trim. Strands of gray hair rain down onto the cold flagstones with each sharp snip of the shears, stripping away the ragged prisoner appearance and uncovering the formidable man beneath. With a trusted blade resting nearby in the dim torchlight, the loyal soldier finishes shaping his master's hair. Piercing blue eyes gleam from beneath the silver bangs, radiating an unshakable will that no prison cell or political scheme could ever break. Beside ancient grimoires illuminated by flickering candlelight, the old soldier bows forward and rests his forehead against his master in a silent, emotional vow of eternal allegiance. He whispers his deepest respect, knowing their shared journey is far from over. The wooden door creaks open and shuts tightly, leaving the quiet chamber behind. Now fully groomed and standing tall in his simple garments, our master takes a deep breath, ready to face the world once more. Back at the mansion's opulent library, bright morning sun pours through the massive glass windows. Sitting uncomfortably in a high-backed leather chair, our 9-year-old menace waits nervously as his father prepares to address his recent crazy antics. The Count sits behind his desk, intensely reading through a detailed report of the boy's latest stunt. Squeezing his small hands together, Lil Bro sweats bullets under his father's sharp, unreadable gaze, bracing himself for a brutal lecture. The Lord taps his finger against the wooden table in a slow, agonizing rhythm that makes the room feel 10 times tenser. But instead of exploding in rage, he surprisingly drops the matter, leaving our boy completely stunned that he actually got away with it. Remembering the doctor's strict orders about taking his prescribed medicine, the young master awkwardly agrees to follow along. Instantly, a heavy, dead silence falls over the spacious room as father and son stare across the desk with zero idea what to say next. Sitting stiff as a wooden board with his fists clenched tightly on his lap, the little general endures the absolute torture of pure awkwardness, praying for anyone to break the silence. As the agonizing silence drags on inside the library, the Count suddenly shifts focus to the dangerous beast waves assaulting the northern frontier wall. Swarms of vicious monsters are pushing their defensive lines to the absolute limit, forcing the Lord to reevaluate his entire military hierarchy. When his father considers appointing a new company commander to stabilize the front lines, our 9-year-old menace raises an eyebrow in quiet curiosity. The former Archmage instantly recognizes that high-stakes tactical moves are unfolding, and every position on this board will carry massive consequences. Right on cue, heavy footfalls echo through the doorway as 2 battle-scared frontier officers enter the chamber. A bandaged veteran immediately locks eyes with Lil Bro, offering a surprisingly warm and respectful salute that catches our young master completely off guard. With serious military business taking over the desk, the Lord quietly dismisses his son from the room. Walking out into the grand hallway, the little general maintains a stoic posture, but his sharp blue eyes are already calculating the hidden tactical motives of the officers inside. Behind closed doors, the Count gets straight to the point, confronting his commanders over their uncharacteristic impatience during such critical beast waves. The injured officer stands firm, fully aware of the brutal realities and bloody sacrifices required to hold the territory's outer boundary. Meanwhile, pacing down the carpeted corridor, our boy realizes the legendary identity of the soldiers he just passed. Known across the realm as the Shield of the Kingdom, these ruthless veterans are the ultimate frontline wall standing between humanity and total annihilation. Before he can process his next move, frantic footfalls shatter the quiet hallway. The mansion's head butler comes sprinting at breakneck speed, sweating bullets and gasping for air as if the entire estate were collapsing right behind him. Out on the stone walkway overlooking the inner courtyard, the out-of-breath servant finally intercepts our 9-year-old menace. Doubled over and desperate, the butler struggles to catch his breath before delivering whatever urgent crisis brought him running across the grounds. Completely unbothered by the servant's panic, our boy turns around with icy composure. Sweating profusely under his young master's unreadable gaze, the flustered butler hesitates, bracing himself to deliver news that could turn the entire mansion upside down. Standing on the stone balcony, the butler trembles as he reveals horrifying evidence of foul play. Dark bloodstains and severed fingertips point straight to a ruthless assault hidden within the estate's shadows, instantly putting our young master on high alert. Our 9-year-old menace narrows his eyes, recognizing the sinister mark of a high-level assassin. Back in a secluded chamber, severed fingers lie scattered across the cold floor beside a bloodied bed, proving the enemy has already struck deep inside their domain. Sweating profusely under his master's icy gaze, the flustered servant stammers through his alarming report. He struggles to convey the sheer brutality of the secret ambush, terrified by how easily the perpetrators slipped past their security grid without triggering an alarm. See, a shadowy assassin executed a lightning-fast ambush through the subterranean tunnels, unleashing lethal blade strikes with frightening precision. Yet despite the bloody carnage left in their wake, a crucial target managed to survive the slaughter. Lil Bro's sharp blue eyes gleam with intense tactical calculation as the out-of-breath butler gasps in shock. Refusing to waste even a single second on useless panic, the little general steps right past the shaken servant, marching forward with unyielding momentum. Meanwhile, word spreads of 2 high-ranking knights demanding an immediate military tribunal after a bloody clash in the city sewers. Amid the rising tension, a battle-scared veteran emerges as the key figure holding vital secrets of the realm. Gritting his teeth with dark resolve, our boy storms past the grand family crest displayed along the corridor. Every heavy step echoes through the hallway as the former Archmage prepares to launch a ruthless counteroffensive against those threatening his territory. Arriving at the dungeon entrance, the little general confronts the spear-wielding sentry without a moment of hesitation. He forcefully orders the guard to grant him immediate access to the holding cell where a high-risk death row prisoner sits locked up for mutiny. Deep inside the cold stone cell, a heavily bound warrior sits in silence with his head bowed low. Scarred from countless battles, this imprisoned general possesses the devastating military strength our young master needs to crush his enemies and rewrite destiny. Piercing eyes lock onto the young master, revealing an unyielding battle spirit hidden beneath those heavy iron chains. Our young master steps down into the dark dungeon, suspecting this captive mercenary might hold crucial answers about who orchestrated the surprise assault. Inside the cell, the shackled prisoner glares up with pure malice, trying to intimidate the silver-haired boy standing right outside his bars. Without warning, the captive surges forward and slams his heavy iron chains violently against the iron bars, attempting to break the kid's composure. Instead of flinching, our boy stares right back with ice-cold blue eyes and flashes a mocking smirk, instantly catching the assassin off guard. Cold sweat drips down the prisoner's face. Overwhelmed by the sheer pressure radiating from an 11-year-old child, the hardened killer staggers back. See, back when the kingdom's brutal civil war was escalating, a ruthless rebellion tore through the realm, leaving crowns shattered and blades soaked in blood. Stunned to his core, the captive stammers in disbelief, demanding to know how a child could possibly uncover secrets buried long ago. Our boy reveals he read it in an old illustrated historical record, exposing the captive's true identity as a renowned war figure. With bright blue mana flaring in his eyes, the little general makes his move to subjugate the warrior, leaving the former knight completely speechless. Watching the young master's chest flare with pristine blue mana, the captive mercenary gapes in utter disbelief. He cannot fathom how an 11-year-old child possesses such refined magic, let alone secret historical knowledge about a bloody rebellion buried decades ago. The hardened killer's intimidating front crumbles completely under the sheer weight of the boy's terrifying presence, leaving him paralyzed with shock. While the prisoner quakes uncontrollably behind iron bars, our young master stands completely unfazed. Without flinching for even a second, the silver-haired menace stares right back with a cold, mocking smile. Looking down from high above the dungeon cell, the little general treats this bloodthirsty assassin like nothing more than a pawn on his chessboard, flipping the power dynamic in an instant. Cold sweat drips down the mercenary's neck as our boy begins dissecting his mark with surgical precision. Laying out the hard truth with absolute composure, the kid proves he holds every single card in this negotiation. Standing toe-to-toe across the iron threshold, the massive warrior shrinks under the overwhelming aura radiating from a child half his size, unable to muster a response. Flashing eyes lit with intense mana, the silver-haired boy unleashes a wave of pure authority that crushes whatever defiance remained in the captive's mind. Overwhelmed and terrified, the former knight staggers backward in defeat. His iron chains clatter heavily against the stone floor as he sinks to his knees, utterly broken and unable to hold the young master's gaze. Arms crossed, the little general delivers the ultimate psychological death blow. He coldly informs the prisoner that without his intervention, any dream of seeking vengeance against those who betrayed him is dead before it even starts. Huddled on the damp floor, the veteran warrior stares into space in silent agony, realizing his entire future lies squarely in this kid's hands. Having thoroughly dismantled the assassin's spirit, our young master turns on his heel and casually walks away. He leaves the shattered knight to marinate in his own desperation, fully aware that a broken warrior fueled by revenge will eventually swallow his pride and bite the hook. At that same time, deeper in the dungeon's dark corridors, two hooded assassins creep through the stone hallway. Armed to the teeth and moving with stealthy precision, these covert infiltrators advance toward the holding cells, expecting to pull off a swift rescue mission for their captured operative. However, their stealth operation hits an immediate snag when they discover the target cell standing wide open and completely empty. Before they can process what happened, the heavy iron door handle turns from the outside, prompting both assassins to draw their blades in a panic, bracing for a bloody ambush. Instead of heavily armed estate guards charging through, the door swings open to reveal a nervous butler trembling like a homeless person on Christmas. Sweating profusely and shaking like a leaf, the poor servant stands paralyzed at the threshold, leaving the hardened killers completely baffled by this ridiculous sight. Deep in the dungeon corridors, two stealthy infiltrators advance with swords drawn, prepared to cut down any guards standing between them and their extraction target. Sweeping through the dark stone hallway with lethal precision, these hooded killers move silently toward the cell, completely oblivious to the fact that they are walking straight into a trap carefully laid by a child master. Instead of finding an empty holding cell or unsuspecting estate guards, the assassins step into a dimly lit room where a single candle flickers on a rough wooden table. Sitting right in the dark shadows is our silver-haired young master, resting calmly with his arms folded. What was supposed to be a covert rescue operation instantly turns into a nightmarish psychological ambush, leaving both veteran killers frozen in total shock. The little general doesn't even bother pulling out a blade. He simply sits in the flickering light, radiating an icy aura of absolute dominance that suffocates the entire room. Cold sweat bursts across the lead assassin's face as the immense pressure coming off this 11-year-old boy hits him like a physical blow, shattering his composure in seconds. Panicking from the realization that they were outplayed before they even stepped inside, the hardened mercenaries begin to quake. Their tactical confidence vanishes in an instant, replaced by raw terror as the silver-haired menace paralyzes them with his presence alone. Desperate calls to attack collapse into whimpers, leaving them gasping for air under his suffocating gaze. Rising slowly from his seat, our young master casually looks down at the terrified intruders with a cold, relaxed smirk. He treats these deadly operatives like nothing more than minor nuisances who stumbled into the wrong room. Without taking a single aggressive stance or spilling a drop of blood, the silver-haired boy asserts complete control over the battlefield. Utterly broken by his terrifying authority, the hooded infiltrators drop their heavy swords onto the hard stone floor and collapse to their knees in complete surrender. Trembling uncontrollably before the little general, the veteran killers realize their lives hang entirely on his mercy, capping off a masterclass in psychological subjugation. Deep in the snow-swept mountain forest, a lonely cabin serves as a secretive meeting spot for two corrupt operatives. Inside, they eagerly snatch up a heavy cloth pouch stuffed to the brim with shiny gold coins. They think they just pulled off the ultimate payday in complete secrecy, utterly oblivious to the fact that their shady little operation is already compromised. Watching the glittering gold coins cascade into their open palms, the scum can hardly contain their greasy smirks. This massive payoff was supposed to be their ticket out of hardship, compensation for selling out the territory. But on the brutal frontier, dirty money always comes with a lethal receipt attached. Before they can even enjoy counting their loot, heavy boots crunch into the snow right outside the doorway. The wooden door opens to reveal a dark-haired warrior staring them down with terrifying intensity. In a fraction of a second, their smug celebration evaporates into sheer terror as cold sweat drenches their faces. Panic surges through them as Randolph desperately lunges to grab the coin pouch off the table. But one sharp look from the intruder freezes him dead in his tracks, killing any delusion of resisting or pulling a weapon. Caught completely red-handed, the traitors realize their escape plan was dead on arrival. Shift scene to a secluded stone chamber inside the estate, where hot tea steams beneath flickering candlelight. Following a swift and thorough beatdown, the captured schemers spill every detail of their treason under interrogation. Sitting at the head of the table, our silver-haired young master absorbs the confession with ice-cold focus, assessing every single threat. Bandaged and thoroughly battered, the two corrupt soldiers tremble beneath the overwhelming pressure, suffocating the room. Our boy sits calmly with his arms folded, radiating an insane level of dominance that completely breaks their spirit. Randolph nervously stammers out a weak excuse, trying to dodge accountability before judgment falls. Our 9-year-old menace doesn't buy a single word of his pathetic excuses, instantly shutting down Randolph's hypocritical whining. He glares straight into the man's eyes and drops a heavy truth bomb. Lord Frontier would show zero leniency to traitorous dogs, and his own judgment will be just as unforgiving. Pushed past his breaking point, Randolph violently slams both hands onto the table, sending the teacups rattling. He shouts back in defiance, refusing to sit quietly and let a young kid criticize his actions. His face contorts with bitter rage as he prepares to spew out years of bottled-up frustration. Out on the frozen front lines, countless soldiers suffered horrifying deaths in the snow because corrupt officials handed them dull swords and paper-thin armor. Randolph vents his trauma, asking if our boy has ever watched his own brothers freeze to death or get slaughtered due to faulty gear. But our little general remains unmoved by the emotional guilt trip. Instead of flinching at the explosive rant, our silver-haired prodigy slowly pushes his chair back and rises to his feet. He stands tall, looking down at the sweating traitor with sharp, glowing blue eyes that radiate absolute cold authority. With zero hesitation in his step, our boy prepares to deliver the final word that will break this rebel once and for all. Randolph recoils in absolute horror as cold sweat drenches his face, realizing his emotional rant didn't sway the young master for a single second. The sudden surge of killing intent suffocates the entire stone room, instantly crushing whatever remaining courage the corrupt operatives had left. They tremble in sheer panic as our boy calmly reaches for the hilt of his weapon. Without uttering a single word of rebuttal, our silver-haired prodigy unsheathes his heavy steel sword in one smooth, imposing motion. He steps forward with absolute composure, radiating an undeniable aura of ruthless authority that turns the candlelit room into a cold execution floor. The sheer weight of his presence confirms that their final judgment has officially arrived. Randolph violently shouts back in sheer frustration, utterly unable to accept that a 9-year-old menace is holding his life in the palm of his hand. He demands to know how a child could possibly understand the trauma of battle, but our little general doesn't flinch. He simply glares straight into Randolph's soul with freezing blue eyes that promise zero mercy. Lethal blue mana suddenly erupts across the young master's blade, coiling violently around the steel and down to his boots as he prepares to strike. The raw magical aura ripples through the air while his eyes lock onto his target with terrifying focus. In this brutal world, high-level combat mana speaks far louder than any desperate excuse. Driven completely insane by fear, Randolph snaps and draws his own aura-infused sword to make a desperate final stand. He refuses to sit quietly and accept execution, flaring his own mana to challenge the young master directly. Meanwhile, his bandaged comrade watches in utter horror, knowing this reckless gamble will get them both sliced to pieces on the spot. Flashing back to the shiny pouch of gold that dragged them into this mess, Randolph throws away all tactical reason. He lunges forward with a vicious slash, pouring every ounce of his strength into a high-risk offensive. Yet even as the glowing steel comes speeding toward him, our silver-haired master stands perfectly unfazed, ready to end the fight. Randolph screams out in anger, frantically bringing up their past military service atop the icy wall during the harsh winter. He tries to shield his cowardice behind memories of standing shoulder to shoulder with his brothers, claiming that corrupt officials left them to rot without proper gear. In his mind, taking enemy bribe money was their only path to survival. He bitterly recalls watching honorable comrades get bound and dragged away through the snow, nursing years of deep hatred toward the noble elite. But dirty gold never washes away high treason, and our dark-haired warrior glares back with utter disdain, knowing that past suffering can never justify betraying your own homeland. Before Randolph's aura blade can even reach the young master, his own bandaged partner unexpectedly leaps across the table. Steel violently crashes against steel with a sharp metallic roar as sparks burst between them. The bandaged soldier draws his sword mid-air and forcefully blocks Randolph's incoming strike, stopping his suicidal foolishness dead in its tracks. Tears of pure desperation stream down the soldier's face as he yells at Randolph to snap out of this madness. He knows that raising a blade against the silver-haired menace means immediate death, and he strains with every muscle in his body, aggressively holding Randolph back to stop their treason from ending in absolute destruction. Steel roars through the stone chamber as the bandaged soldier forcefully parries Randolph's blade, shutting down his suicidal rampage on the spot. Randolph recoils in sheer disbelief, cold sweat pouring down his face as his own comrade refuses to let him drag them both into execution. In a high-stakes standoff, the traitor's desperate gamble collapses completely, leaving him utterly defenseless before the young master. Thick blood drips onto the floor from the evidence as the seized bribe money is hauled away. With all resistance broken, the bandaged soldier stands submissively before the head of the table and spills the cold hard truth. He openly admits their original orders were to eliminate or silence anyone who uncovered their illicit operation, exposing every dirty layer of their treachery. Our silver-haired prodigy absorbs the confession with ice-cold focus while the soldier hangs his head in absolute shame. He bitterly recalls the terrifying moment our dark-haired warrior cornered them at the snowy cabin, violently shattering their illusions of safety. That sudden, brutal ambush crushed their spirit and sealed their defeat long before they were dragged into this stone dungeon. Bound and humiliated, the corrupt operative stands with his hands behind his back, completely surrendered to whatever ruthless fate awaits him. Our little general sits calmly in his chair, radiating an insane level of oppressive acho that suffocates the entire room. Every second of heavy silence pushes the traitors further past their breaking point as judgment looms. Glowing blue eyes lock onto every subtle movement in the chamber, freezing the shivering traitors right where they stand. Nearby, the shady operative hauling the heavy gold sack quivers in fear, frantically eyeing the exit and wondering if he should make a desperate run for it. But under our boy's watchful gaze, taking a single step toward that door guarantees an instant death. Instead of ordering an immediate execution, a subtle, dangerous smirk slowly spreads across our 9-year-old menace's face. The trembling soldier gasps in sheer shock at the sudden shift, realizing our boy isn't just planning to punish their betrayal. He's already playing 5 steps ahead, preparing to weaponize these corrupt pawns to dismantle the entire enemy operation from within. Down in the gloomy dungeon, our silver-haired boy sits across from the injured guard, demanding to know who pulled the strings behind the assassination plot. Sweating nervously under the young master's intense glare, the man breaks down and confesses everything. See, a hidden mastermind bribed a corrupt knight with a heavy sack of gold, buying his betrayal right inside their own territory. Shadows lengthened across the dark cobblestone street as a ruthless assassin stalked the young master from behind a corner. The hooded killer struck without warning, grabbing the boy and putting a sharp sword directly against his throat. But before blood could be shed, this loyal guard stepped in, disarming the assailant and pinning him forcefully to the cold ground. Yet justice in this kingdom was corrupt and fickle. Instead of rewarding the savior, corrupt officials pinned the blame on him, leaving his executed body swinging from a wooden gallows in the middle of the town square. Staring up at his dead ally, the hooded guard gritted his teeth in sheer rage before slipping away silently into the dark city streets. Back at the mansion, our silver-haired Grandmaster calmly sips warm tea opposite Count Chester by the roaring fireplace. But despite the peaceful atmosphere, heavy tension fills the Grand Hall as they confront the harsh reality of their failing domain. Behind those calm blue eyes, our boy is already analyzing every political maneuver needed to save their land from collapse. Their territory is pushed to the absolute brink by a crippling lack of food and essential supplies, leaving ordinary citizens to starve on rotten potatoes. Outside the icy castle walls, hungry wild wolves prowl through the blizzard. Meanwhile, corrupt nobles sit comfortably behind massive oak desks in the royal capital, ruthlessly demanding their outrageous shield taxes. Count Chester ignites his pipe with a spark of fire magic as dark memories of past ruin resurface. Decades ago, a mad archmage went completely out of control for reasons lost to history. The unstoppable spellcaster unleashed a nightmare of raging flame, reducing the entire royal capital to an apocalyptic wasteland of burning ash and crumbling buildings. To avoid total execution after that catastrophic conflict, their noble house was forced onto its knees before the crown. High imperial officials stripped away their grand ducal status, demoting them to a weak frontier county surrounded by snow-covered wilderness. Remembering this historical disgrace, our 9-year-old menace takes a quiet sip, refusing to let history repeat itself. Setting his teacup down on the saucer with absolute precision, our young general remembers the tragic fate of their soldiers. Dozens of brave men were left to freeze to death in the desolate snow, abandoned by greedy lords who treated frontier lives as cheap disposable pawns. He decides right then and there that playing defense will only guarantee their destruction. Our silver-haired protagonist turns to Count Chester and delivers an outrageously bold strategic counterproposal. He suggests taking ruthless offensive action against their political oppressors rather than begging for financial relief. Hearing such an insane tactical play come from a young boy, the veteran lord freezes in place, his eyes widening in complete shock at the crazy level of audacity. Sitting firmly across the table, our 9-year-old menace lays down his decisive ultimatum without a single trace of hesitation. They will officially announce to the royal court that they refuse to pay another single copper of the unfair shield tax. This is a direct declaration of war against the capital, and our boy is ready to enforce it with absolute force. Count Chester sits frozen in heavy silence, weighing the sheer madness behind his son's outrageous strategic counterproposal. Decades of brutal noble oppression tell the veteran lord that declaring direct war on the royal capital is pure suicide. Yet as he clasps his hands tight beneath his chin, his sharp blue eyes flare with the terrifying realization that sticking to passive defense guarantees their total economic annihilation. Sitting firmly across the ornate lounge table, our 9-year-old menace doesn't flinch under his father's crushing gaze. The regressed Archmage projects absolute tactical dominance, letting his piercing blue eyes lock straight onto the old lord. As the heavy silence inside the Grand Hall stretches to its absolute breaking point, Lil Bro doesn't show a single sliver of hesitation or fear. Opening his hands in a calm gesture, our boy breaks down the cold mechanics of their political deadlock. He reminds the Count that begging greedy nobles in the royal capital for financial relief will only invite more bloodthirsty vultures to plunder their starving territory. Taking a ruthless offensive stance right now is their only tactical play to flip the entire imperial chessboard. As the Count listens in stunned silence, Lil Bro tightens his right fist with absolute conviction, a cold, lethal smirk spreading across his young face. He promises that with his secret mastery of war and high-level magic, refusing the shield tax won't just shock the royal court, it will force their corrupt oppressors directly into a deadly, unescapable trap. Count Chester slowly raises his teacup to his lips, taking a measured sip as he digests every dangerous detail of the boy's insane strategy. Standing right behind the couch, the veteran butler breaks into a nervous cold sweat, his face turning pale with sheer disbelief at how casually this young master intends to defy the authority of the entire imperial court. Suddenly, the Count pushes himself off his seat and steps directly over to the massive glass window overlooking the snowy manor grounds. Looking down through the high pane, he spots our silver-haired general striding out into the courtyard, moving with the quiet authority of an elite commander who already foresees every tactical move their political enemies will make. Out on the courtyard stones, our boy approaches his tall knight, quietly issuing secret operational directives to begin preparing their house guards for battle. High above in the lounge, Chester presses his hand flat against the glass window, tapping his fingers in a slow rhythm as he fully grasps the terrifying depth of his son's hidden intellect. Standing in the background, the old butler permits himself a subtle smile, recognizing that the young master's ruthless ambition might be the exact spark needed to save their ruined domain from total collapse. With a final firm tap against the window glass, Count Chester silently grants his tacit approval for the young menace to take full command of the strategic offensive. Meanwhile, under the icy cover of a dark blizzard night, an unmarked horse carriage comes to a halt outside an abandoned stone chapel deep in the wilderness. A hooded operative holding a flickering lantern steps out onto the snow-covered porch, waiting in total silence as heavy footsteps echo across the frozen cobblestone path leading through the shadowy, dangerous trees. A mysterious traveler cloaked in black with a wide-brimmed hat steps down from the carriage frame and locks eyes with the lantern-bearer. Beneath the dark cowl, secret conspirators exchange low, serious whispers, initiating a covert shadow operation that will soon set the stage for an explosive confrontation between this fierce frontier county and their ruthless capital oppressors. The heavy carriage door swings open with a sharp creak, and two hooded operatives step out onto the snow. Between them, they drag a bound captive into the midnight cold. It's none other than our silver-haired protagonist, securely tied up with thick ropes and a heavy gag wrapped tight around his jaw. The lantern-bearer steps forward, lifting the warm flame straight to the boy's face to verify their target. Exposing a hideous, twisted scar across his cheek, the ruthless operative erupts into a grotesque grin, thrilled that their ambush against the Count's heir succeeded without raising a single alarm back at the manor. Setting the lantern down onto the frozen cobblestones, the guard shoves open the chapel's massive wooden doors. Heavy darkness spills out into the night as the hooded captors march their bound prize across the porch, forcing our young master right toward the shadowed interior of the hideout. Emerging from the pitch-black hallway, a sinister old woman leaning heavily on a wooden walking stick steps out into view. Her eerie presence confirms that high-level puppet masters within this underground syndicate have arrived in person to inspect the captured noble boy before deciding his ultimate fate. An unnatural, bone-chilling aura suddenly sweeps across the desolate courtyard, making the hat-wearing conspirator shiver uncontrollably. Cold sweat drips down his pale face as he tightens his cloak around his chest, his instincts screaming that a dangerous unseen force has just descended upon the chapel. Flanked by two towering guards, our silver-haired menace stands quietly in the freezing wind without showing a single trace of fear. Beneath that cloth gag, his piercing blue eyes glare with deadly focus. The regressed Archmage allowed himself to be taken, luring these unsuspecting fools directly into his lethal trap. Under heavy guard, cloaked operatives lead a bound, blindfolded prisoner down dark stone stairs. But our silver-haired boy isn't sweating one bit. Even blind and captive, the little general moves with absolute calm, reading his captor's every step in the shadowy depths. Back at the sunlit garden pavilion, our boy sits across from his dark-haired companion, calmly sipping tea like a seasoned commander. The warrior sits in tense silence, unable to fathom how a kid commands such overwhelming presence. The air grows heavy between them. Sizing each other up over steaming cups, our 9-year-old menace keeps his posture relaxed while his ally carefully weighs the lethal stakes. One wrong word here could tip the scales into total catastrophe. Flash a smirk break their resolve. Lil Bro drops a sly smile, and his companion immediately breaks into a cold sweat. This isn't child's play. Our boy is pulling the tactical strings with terrifying precision. Then our boy goes for the throat. He calls out the greedy old monster who mercilessly slaughtered the family his companion bled to build. The cold truth hits like a warhammer, sending shock and raw vengeance surging through the veteran's eyes. Staring back with sharp, glowing blue eyes, our boy locks down the room. The veteran glares in stunned conflict, but neither side yields an inch. Right over their unfinished tea, an unspoken pact forged in vengeance is officially sealed. Meanwhile, out in the city streets, high-stakes drama ignites. A bald priest flanked by armored temple knights preaches fanatical propaganda to the crowds. Public anger boils over, turning the central plaza into an absolute powder keg. Riding right past the turmoil, undercover allies watch closely from inside a shadowed carriage. Peeking through the curtains alongside his battle-worn crew, our boy's ally tracks the Holy Order's movements, preparing to strike when the moment is right. Back inside the safe house, our silver-haired strategist lays down the cold, hard reality to his squad. These cultists aren't just causing random riots in the plaza. They are executing a cold, calculated plan to gain massive infamy through blood and terror. Hearing the overwhelming scale of this dark conspiracy, his battle-hardened allies break into a cold sweat, realizing they are standing right in the crosshairs of a ruthless enemy capable of turning whole cities into weapons of war. Out on the city streets, that bald fanatic preaches to the desperate crowds, masking horrific crimes under the guise of divine salvation. Behind his holy speech lies dark magic, bloody sacrifices, and sickening cannibalism that would make any veteran soldier tremble. But our 9-year-old menace sits relaxed with arms crossed, calmly dissecting every single layer of the cult's twisted psychological warfare without flinching once. He knows every word out of that priest's mouth is lethal poison. Follow the money, find the mastermind behind the curtains. A gleaming royal silver coin stamped with the lion emblem confirms this religious uprising is heavily bankrolled by high-ranking nobility and corrupt political powerhouses. While his crew tenses up over the deadly political trap, the little general locks in with glowing blue eyes, mentally calculating every tactical move needed to dismantle their secret network from the top down before they strike first. Look closer and the divine facade completely crumbles into ash. Beneath the priest's bright, glowing halo lies a horrifying trail of blood, marked by heavy executioner axes buried straight into dark magic ritual circles.